Mark, I take very seriously.
Focus!
Now, you were an atheist and now have become an agnostic.
I don't even understand the phraseology here. Let's change the words to fit their definitions. He was someone who didn't believe in God, and now he's someone who doesn't know if God exists. This is why it's confusing listening to people who don't use standard definitions. One word is about belief, the other is about knowledge. And as cringeworthy as statements of conversion are at the best of times, this one is downright bizarre.
Not only was I an atheist, but before then I was actually a priest.
And that's an even bigger wrinkle in the statement of conversion. I'm rapidly losing confidence that this video will have anything useful to say.
I began to feel that atheism itself entails a kind of puritanism and, in a sense, a kind of dishonesty.
What would even have to go wrong in someone's brain to equate atheism with puritanism?
Let me be clear about that. There is a sort of atheism which just says, well, I don't really know.
That's agnosticism. Atheism means you don't believe. Agnostic means you don't know.
And the idea of God doesn't really matter to me one way or another.
And now we're on to yet a third one, apatheism. If you're not familiar with that term, it was coined by Robert Nash, and it's someone who's just not interested in the idea of God's existence one way or the other, Diderot being a historical example. So, again, we're taking disparate concepts and mashing them together. Not that it's incompatible, there are agnostic atheists and apatheistic atheists, but he's just mashing these concepts all together in very confusing ways.
But increasingly there is a kind of militant atheism.
New rule. If you use the term militant atheism, you've lost the argument. Until you can show me Richard Dawkins throwing Molotov cocktails at a church, there is no militant atheism.
Which wants to actually proselytize people and to persuade them to become atheists too. And I think what the mistake that those atheists make is that they pretend that something's certain when it's not.
And now a bit of projection. If something's not certain, you shouldn't believe in it. The null hypothesis is what you're rationally left with unless you have sufficient evidence to believe the posit. The only something certain with atheism is that theists haven't even come anywhere close to meeting their burden of proof. And I'd just like to point out, this is an educational series shown on PBS. This is what's being proffered as correct information to give to people to help enlighten their understanding.
They pretend that you can prove that God doesn't exist.
That's not atheism. That's anti-theism. Geez, that's how many different concepts mashed together now? And again, where are all these mysterious atheists who claim to have proven that God doesn't exist? Dawkins didn't claim to do that in The God Delusion. Christopher Hitchens never even said he was trying to do that. And it's an irrelevant distraction. The burden of proof is on the theists. Always has been, always will be.
So my agnosticism it comes from T.H. Huxley, who is the chap that invented the word agnostic. And what Huxley said, it was a rebuke, in fact, both to the religious believers of his day, who presented their beliefs as if they're verifiably true, but also to the scientists of his day, who thought that science could disprove God too.
I've looked, and I can't find the part he thinks he's quoting. Huxley introduced the term agnosticism in his short 1884 essay, Agnosticism, a Symposium. In it, he wrote, "Agnosticism is of the essence of science, whether ancient or modern. It simply means that a man shall not say he knows or believes that which he has no scientific grounds for professing to know or believe." His next point comes sorta close, where he wrote, "Consequently, agnosticism puts aside not only the greater part of popular theology, but also the greater part of anti-theology. On the whole, the bosh of heterodoxy is more offensive to me than that of orthodoxy, because heterodoxy professes to be guided by reason and science, and orthodoxy does not." But in complete opposition to what Vernon related, Huxley wrote, "I have no doubt that scientific criticism will prove destructive to the forms of supernaturalism which enter into the constitution of existing religions. On trial of any so-called miracle, the verdict of science is not proven. Agnosticism simply says that we know nothing of what may be beyond phenomena."
Huxley said no, the question of the existence of God will never be settled.
I really took a deep dive into Huxley, and I can't see him saying that anywhere. And it's really against his character to say that we'll never know something. In fact, in his 1889 essay, Christianity and Agnosticism, he wrote, "I do not very much care to speak of anything as unknowable. What I am sure about is that there are many topics about which I know nothing, and which, as far as I can see, are out of reach of my faculties. But whether these are unknowable by anyone else is exactly one of those matters which is beyond my knowledge, though I may have a tolerably strong position as to the probabilities of the case." So yeah, we basically see Huxley saying the exact opposite.
Well, science would say that as they learn more in the last century, the enormity of what we've learned in physics and cosmology and even biology, molecular genetics, is filling in every hole that God used to live in. And soon there'll be no place left for God to hide.
What I would question with that picture of science is just what science can, in fact, answer. Science has been a tremendous success, a triumph, and it has, sure, it's asked and answered an enormous number of questions, but it hasn't asked all questions, let alone answered them all.
Blatant straw man. The claim is not that science has answered everything. We see this straw man from Woos all the time. If science answered everything, it would stop. The claim, which is true by the way, is that science has answered all the questions where religion used to live. All of the questions about life, where it came from, what's the nature of disease, what's the makeup of the cosmos, and so on, have been answered, at least to the extent where we can show that the religious answers are wrong. There's just no parsimony with God anymore. Every time we form a model of how something works, we find we don't need to insert God to do it. And that's true with every single aspect of life that religions have covered. And while it is true that there are many questions science can't as of yet answer, the only reason why we know to even ask those questions to begin with is because of science. They're so far beyond what any religion has even tried to cover that we can safely say we've left all need of religion completely behind.
You take something like light. Light is famously described as both a particle and as a wave. Now, those two things are incompatible.
No, they're not. Otherwise, quantum mechanics wouldn't be a proper scientific theory. But you're going way beyond the context of the question. Unless you can show me somewhere in the Bible or the Quran or wherever where God takes a position on particle-wave duality.
It can't ultimately say what light is.
Yes, it can. It's got a very comprehensive theory about it, in fact, but that's irrelevant to the point.
So even within its own domain, I think, science needs to recognize its limits.
And here we start to see his true colors. Science is supposed to have limits. No, it's not. Saying that there are things we don't understand today doesn't make it off limits for future scientists to examine.
When you hear the atheistic arguments, the militant ones, normally by scientists, some philosophers.
Who? Who are these militant atheists? Come on, Kuhn, you're supposed to be an educator here. Ask a difficult question. Challenge the guy. Your viewers won't learn things as long as you just lob softballs at people who clearly don't know what they're talking about.
Do you think that the problem is that they're unable to explain everything, or does it go beyond that and that there are areas of human or areas of existence that are truly real, truly profound, whether it's morality or existence itself, that science doesn't deal with, that in essence would undermine atheism.
Yeah, my worry with militant atheists is actually the world that they're creating, as it were. It seems to be a world where things like morality, things like spirituality, they either steer clear of them or they explain them away.
See what I mean? Kuhn asked him a question that just went along with his assumptions, and here's Vernon not even answering it, just bloviating. No, they do not either steer clear of them or explain them away. Deontology is a thing. Ethology is a thing. It ends up being more projection, as he spends the next couple of minutes just trying to explain it away while not addressing the actual question. Don't believe me? Follow the link below and watch the video for yourself. And you might find the next couple of minutes entertaining as well, where he goes on about how atheists actually contribute to religion by shedding bad gods. Atheists show how gods that, say, condemn homosexuality are bad and unworthy of worship. He never gets around to saying why he thinks that would be a benefit to religion.
As an agnostic, I would say that's got to remain open. We've got to learn to live with the fact that that question can't ultimately be answered.
Then you're not an agnostic, at least not by Huxley's description that I quoted earlier. So finally, with about a minute and a half to go, Kuhn finally gets around to challenging Vernon.
Atheists don't want to impoverish the human condition by taking out morality or great art, music, culture. Just the opposite. They want to enrich it by taking out the problem, which is God, and allowing human beings to freely address and imbibe all of these wonderful things. But the problem is God, because that infests all of this good emotion and creativity with an artificial concept that is untrue and is divisive and takes people in completely the wrong directions.
Excellent point, Kuhn. Now let's see what Vernon does with it.
I think that the trouble with insisting that there is no God and that morality and creativity can have nothing to do with God is you actually cut yourself off from one of the mainstays of the moral and the creative tradition. Sure, identify what's bad religion, but don't, in so doing, knock out what's good and valuable.
Yep, that's his entire answer.
But how much of the valuable is there really?
I think that the reason why religion is of value is because it's the tradition that's engaged most seriously with the limits of what we know.
No, it hasn't. It's pretended that there aren't any limits, and if you want to know anything, just turn to this ancient book or to your priest or whatever, and all the answers are there. And remember, the title of this video is Atheism's Best Arguments. But what we have is someone who doesn't understand the science, doesn't even understand the philosophy, clinging desperately to the coattails of religion, saying he knows the ultimate limits of human knowledge while saying others are in danger of hubris. Here's why Vernon is an irrational person. The greatest strength you as a rational person can have is the ability to recognize when you're confused, because if you can't, then you can't be more confused by fiction than reality. What we see from Vernon is confusion all over the place, but he's been able to couch it in such pseudo-philosophical terms, he doesn't see it. So thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe, leave a comment, and go to donate.bogosity.tv to keep me doing what I do. And check out all the great content here, like this video selected just for you.